to the Which Was Better podcast, where we decide which was better, the book or the movie. I'm your host, Lisa, and this week I have got a doozy for y'all. I'm so excited about this one. It was one of the book-movie adaptation combos that made me want to do this podcast in the first place. And to finally be talking about it, I'm just really so excited. So, this week we are talking Frankenstein. Yep. The Frankenstein, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and the Hallmark adaptation of Frankenstein. Correct. They did do a 2-day miniseries based on the book, and I am super ready to break it down for y'all. Okay. So I'm going to try and keep this episode short in length because honestly, I could talk about this book for hours, but this is a books versus movie podcast, not a Victor Frankenstein is the absolute worst, and here's 150 reasons why podcast. So I will try and keep it just to the book versus movie angle. But before I dive into that, let me give you a little background of my history with Frankenstein, aka I have none. My experience with Frankenstein amounts to the old Universal movie, Hotel Transylvania, and numerous, and when I say numerous, I mean dozens and dozens of viewings of one of the greatest movies ever made, Young Frankenstein. So I went into this book because I hadn't actually read the book, but I went into it thinking, oh, I know what I'm getting into. I've seen these. I've seen these movies. It's fine. No, absolutely not. I very much did not know what I was getting into. And y'all, I am still mad about this book. I read this over a month ago, and there are times when I'm still ranting to my husband, my poor husband, who very graciously listens. And yeah, shout out to him. I'm very sorry. But yes, I'm talking there was even a time when he was out of town and he was 3 hours behind us. He was in Seattle, and I was texting him and I was like, I know it's 6 a.m. where you're at, but I just go on these little rants, but you know what? It's fine. It's fine. So sorry to him, but here we go. Let's start with the book. The book was first conceived in 1816, but it was not published until January of 1818. The book was heavily edited after that first version and republished in 1831. And this is the version that most people read. So, side note, now, of course, I should have prefaced this. This was written by Mary Shelley, and I'm sorry if you don't know that already. I'm sorry, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But I do have a copy of this book that contains both versions, and I actually ended up listening to the audio version, and I used it, I listened to it and had the 1818 text, in front of me so I could compare. And the audio version was the 1831. And then I followed the text, and there are differences. Yes. But again, I'm just going to try and talk about the movie and book differences because I could go on and on. But the book summary is this, the back of the book summary is: obsessed with creating life itself, Victor Frankenstein plunders graveyards for the material to fashion a new being, which he shocks into life with electricity. But his botched creature, rejected by Frankenstein and denied human companionship, sets out to destroy his maker and all he holds dear. Whew, okay. So the movie, Hallmark Entertainment. Now, so this is tricky because this was Hallmark Entertainment, which is technically Hallmark, but this was during a time when they were, I guess, I don't know if the right word is called a production company, because, they've made their own movies, but, it was Hallmark Channel, but sort of, this was in the early aughts. So this was in 2004. It came out in October, it was a 2-day series, October 5th through 6th in 2004. And y'all, this was a star-studded cast. So this had Donald Sutherland, Julie Delpy, William Hurt, Ian McNeice, Jean Rochefort, and a super young Dan Stevens, which I thought was funny. And coincidentally, the audiobook that I was listening to read this was narrated by Dan Stevens. So the two main parts, Victor Frankenstein was played by Alex Newman and the creature was played by Luke Goss. And the movie summary, Hallmark's movie summary to this is: when the brilliant but unorthodox scientist, Dr. Victor Frankenstein rejects the artificial man that he created. The creature escapes and swears revenge. So it's pretty similar. I mean, there's not a whole lot of differences there. This, they really tried to make a faithful adaptation. But y'all, this is the way I describe this book and therefore this adaptation. This is like the Turducken of literature. It's a story within a story with another story inside that story. And even that story has a tiny story. So a quick timeline. If you haven't read this at all, just a quick timeline. In the first story of this Turducken, a man named Robert Walton is desperate to voyage to the North Pole, He's just like, it's kind of like a calling. He just can't stop himself. So he gathers a team and he takes off to find adventure in the North Pole. And he sets out on what ends up being a disastrous adventure. But throughout this, he writes a letter to his sister, Mrs. Saville, to tell her of his progress, but also to tell her how lonely he is. In his travels, he ends up finding and rescuing a basically near-death Victor Frankenstein. Previously, just to finding Victor Frankenstein, he sees this very odd, thinks it's a man, very large, doesn't know, it's off in the distance. Of course, they're in the middle of, the water. The boat with Victor Frankenstein comes across and they find him and they rescue him because he's on the brink of death. And in kind of treating Victor Frankenstein back to health, he learns his story. So part of it is like Robert Walton telling his sister, like relaying this tale about Victor. So the first story is Robert Walton's story. Second story is Victor Frankenstein telling his entire life story to Robert Walton. And when I say his entire life story, I mean his entire life story. Also, that little tiny part where he might have created a dude and then abandoned him. Yeah. Robert Walton is unfazed. The third story happens. So in Victor Frankenstein's retelling of his life story and creating the creature and just trying to warn Robert Walton, he basically sees in Robert Walton a little bit of himself, like this kind of crazed, like frenzy to explore and to, find new discoveries. And they both can't help themselves, right? Robert Walton with his trip to the North Pole and Victor Frankenstein with creating life from death. So he sets out to tell him like this warning, like, please don't follow in my footsteps. So in his story, which he starts at the very beginning of his life, he then starts a third story, which he finally stumbles across the creature. And then we learn the creature's backstory because we have to hear from the time the creature's born to the end, we learn the entirety of his story. And within that story, the creature relays a tiny story about a family called the DeLacy's that the creature follows around for a while. And that's how he learns to talk. And he's very, very intelligent and he learns how to read and write and learns, emotions. And basically this is how he learns to be a person. So yeah, it's a story within a story within a story with a tiny story within that story. And I know I'm leaving out a lot, but I really implore you to read this book if you haven't, because it's banana pants and exhausting. It is pages and pages of Victor Frankenstein's torment, then the creature's torment, then the DeLacy's torment, and then even sort of like Robert Walton, the pseudo narrator, his torment. It's so much torment. I mean, everybody take a drink the next time I say torment. But this was basically like the romantic period. So it's all those stories were all about feelings and the individual and emotions and exploring. And as a person who's very stoic and loves the teachings of the Stoics, this is why I find this entire story exhausting. So basically, Victor Frankenstein tells his story from the beginning. He's a very inquisitive child. As he grows up in a very loving household, his parents are fantastic. So much so that they gift him a girl. Yes, an actual, girl. They're like, here, you're great. Here's a girl. Eventually, we want you to marry her. So basically, they give him a girl. Strange. But her name is Elizabeth, and she becomes important, throughout the story because they grow up together. They are eventually betrothed. They fall in love, etc. Victor finds himself just restless with life. He wants to explore. He wants to learn. He starts reading books about, these certain sciences that talk about bringing life after death, and he just becomes enamored of it. He becomes desperate to learn more. He leaves for university. He finds these professors that, the first one kind of laughs it off. He's like, you read those people? Yeah, they're bonkers. Don't do that. And then he finds a second professor is like, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, if you want to follow this path, you need to do this and this. And this second professor named Professor Waldman really encourages him to hey, explore this if this is what you feel like your calling is. And Victor does, to the point where it's becomes a madness where he just can't stop himself, to the detriment of his health, his emotional well-being, his, mental health, everything. And he succeeds. He finally gets to it and he creates a monster. Well, it's not even a monster at that point. He creates a creature. And the moment the creature comes to life, Victor Frankenstein is freaked out. It's oh my God, he's disgusting. And he bolts. He totally abandons him. And he takes off, and he leaves. And then eventually he goes back, I want to say the next day, maybe a day or two later. I don't remember, honestly. But when he goes back, he sees that his laboratory is empty. The creature's gone. He's like, oh, problem solved. He's gone. I'll just live my life now. I mean, it's over. Yeah, no. And so he's telling this story to Robert Walton. And throughout, he finally gets to the point where, yes, he and the creature meet back up again. The creature tells him how, hey, all of a sudden I was a person and I was awake and it was very disorienting and I had to figure it all out by myself because you abandoned me and I was left to my own devices. And guess what? Everybody hated me. Everybody shunned me because I'm horrific looking. Because you took dead body parts and sewed them together and made a person. And he's shunned by everyone. And he's, he has to learn basically how to live and survive and what day is and what night is. And, temperatures change and seasons. And, you shouldn't eat that. And, and fire. And fire hurts when you touch it. That sort of thing. And eventually the creature finds a family to kind of hide out and watch. And then, of course, the creature has to tell that story. So we do get that story from the beginning. Good Lord, it's a lot. And so he kind of secretly spies on this family and he learns how to read and write. And he, just wants to take care of them when they're not around. He does things for them. He chops wood. He tries to help out the family. And eventually gets to the point where he's so desperate to know them and to love them and to be a part of their family that he takes a risk. And when most of the family is gone, except for the older gentleman of the family, the grandpa, I think, or the dad who's blind, he goes in and he tries to talk to him and says, please help me. I'm being shunned by everyone. And the blind man is like, how can people shun you? You sound so nice. You sound so delightful. Well, everybody comes back and sees that it's this 8-foot creature made out of body parts. And they're like, hello, get out. And they kick him out. And of course, he's just tortured by it. He's, it's horrific for him because everywhere he goes, he gets rejected and it builds a rage into him, and eventually he crosses paths with Victor Frankenstein's family. And as time goes on and the more he gets rejected, the more his revenge builds up and he starts basically murdering everybody that Victor Frankenstein's ever known. And that leads them to a big chase across the country. And they really want to murder each other, but at the same time, they're so intertwined together that they don't. And they just chase each other around and everybody's miserable and it's pages and pages of their feelings. And then Victor Frankenstein dies and the creature comes back, is like, oh, he's dead. Now I'm sad. And he walks off. There you go. That's the gist of it. So the movie actually follows that timeline pretty well. And like I said, I haven't seen a whole lot of Frankenstein adaptations. The Universal one does not follow the book. It's a lot more horror based, and Young Frankenstein is just funny. So obviously that doesn't follow. I mean, it follows sort of, there's certain key aspects that it pulls from it, but obviously it's not the book. But is it a faithful adaptation? For the most part, yes. Now here are some key differences. So the setup for the movie is slightly different. It's still a boat. It's still the middle of like this icy North Pole track. But we meet Robert Walton, and he's not writing letters to his sister. He's not super lonely. In fact, he's a lot older than I anticipated because he's Donald Sutherland. And so it's not the same setup there. The experiments that Victor Frankenstein performs in order to achieve creating life after death, in the movie, they really dive into those. They show him robbing graves. They show him frantically working in his lab, like becoming more and more of a recluse. They show him bringing animals to life. Side note, they do kill a dog in this. Hello. I was like, this ain't in the book. I was mad. I was so upset. I was like, how could you do this to us? And they show it. They don't just like do it off camera. They show it like twice. It's awful. They show him dying, and then they show him bringing him back, and then they show him dying again. It's terrible. But, in the movie, they show this like him rapidly deteriorating in both physical and mental health. And it's so creepy. It's so unsettling. I mean, in the book, Victor Frankenstein talks about it, but it's all his words. He doesn't go into detail. Like Mary Shelley never gives us details of how he does create this creature, how, the science behind it, the methods that he used. No, it's all of Victor's emotions about the toil and the trauma. And oh my God, I was so tortured. And then there's Professor Waldman, who's, in the books, is the one that encourages him. And it's the same in the movie. And this character is actually played by William Hurt with a German accent, which is sort of off-putting, but sure. So in the book, he encourages him. He's like, oh, you've read these previous scientists who, have studied this. Here, let me supplement it. Let me help you. But in the book, you never get the idea that Professor Waldman is like, oh, he's about to sew some dead body parts together and make a living, breathing creature. He's just thinking, okay, he's very interested in all sciences. Let me help him be a good student. Whereas in the movie, Professor Waldman does figure out what Victor Frankenstein is up to. And he, on several occasions, pleads with him, don't do this. Listen, you have two paths here and you're going down the wrong one. I'm telling you, please don't do this. And Victor Frankenstein's, I know better than you do, that sort of thing. So there's also, like, before I talked about the experiments with the dog dying, like, again, why? You could have really done that off camera, but okay. In the deaths, so a lot of people die. Victor Frankenstein's little brother, his name is William. William's caretaker, Justine, gets blamed for the murder and she hangs, so she dies. Victor Frankenstein's childhood friend, who ends up following him throughout the course of his life, they go to college together. His name is Henry Clerval. He goes to college with him. Like, he grew up together with him, and the little girl that got gifted to Victor, Elizabeth, they all three were playmates together. So when Victor goes off to college, Henry goes with him. Later, when Victor has to leave and go do some more experiments, Henry's there. Henry's in his life a lot. So Henry also dies. Sorry. If you haven't read this, sorry. Henry dies. Victor's father dies. Victor's mother dies. Like, everyone dies, man. Elizabeth dies. Everyone dies. And the movie is not shy about showing every single one of these deaths. All of them. Like, not even like, okay, well, a camera tilt or just we get the innuendo. No, they show every death, which is very shocking. Not just because it's a Hallmark. And that's the thing is, like, Hallmark of yore, back in the day, they used to do these big, productions, adaptations, like these big, Hallmark Hall of Fame movies. And they didn't shy away from, the cookie cutter stuff that we started getting, like 2010 to now. just now they're starting to bring back some of the more realistic storylines and stuff like that. But they used to do this all the time. So it was nothing. It wasn't like a big deal. It is just shocking, though, after years and years of seeing these very sterile, very cookie cutter movies, to see them going back, to see something previous where, oh yeah, they show everybody die. So the first death, Victor Frankenstein's little brother, in the book, it's out of revenge. The creature finds him, has been rejected by everyone, realizes, because he has Victor Frankenstein's journal, and he learns about his, how he came about, how Victor had created him, and how basically he abandoned him. And so he wants revenge, and he ends up killing his little brother. They come across each other, and he kills him. He straight up murders the little kid. And in the movie, it's the same thing. And yes, we see it. But it's presented more as an accident. Like, it's a very, in the book of Mice and Men with Lenny and the kittens. They're kittens, right? They're not, I think they're kittens. And he squeezes it too hard because he doesn't know his own strength, and he kills it. It's so sad. It's kind of it's presented the same way in the movie. So the creature doesn't know his own strength, and he accidentally squeezes the kid too hard, trying to get answers from him. But so it's slightly different in the movie, and I think it takes away some of the ramping up of his vengeance, the escalation. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. It kind of takes that away, because by showing in the movie that it's an accident, it's like, well, he didn't mean to. But in the book version, it's very much an escalation. It gets to the point where, the creature just can't stop himself. And so, that's a huge difference there. And throughout all of this, Victor keeps all of this really to himself. Yes, he's telling Robert Walton, but in the retelling, as it's happening, as the events are happening, his studies, his experiments, the aftermath of creating a creature, everybody dying, Victor doesn't tell anybody what he's done at all. Robert Walton is the first person he's actually told, hey, this is what I've been up to. This is what I did. So he keeps it a secret, like, forever. And these poor family members around him who've at one point lose their youngest son or brother in William, and then eventually his caretaker, Justine, and, eventually Elizabeth, like, everybody around them is like desperate. Like, they're just swallowed up in grief throughout the story. And they're just like, desperate for answers, and Victor has them and he never tells them, and it's so incredibly selfish. Oh my gosh. So these secrets that Victor keeps to himself, at one point, Elizabeth and Victor decide they're going to get married, even though Victor is very much still in his head about all of this. And he tells Elizabeth, I will tell you my secrets the day after we're married, but not before. Whereas in the movie, she's like, listen, I don't want to know. I mean, I know something's plaguing you and it's fine, whatever it is. Do you think I won't love you anymore? I mean, so let's just get married and then you can tell me after, but let's just get married first. So in the movie, it's Elizabeth's choice to wait. And in the book, it's Victor's demand, I'm not going to tell you until after we're married, which I'm like, way to trap her, dude. Okay. So very different motivations between the book and the movie on Victor's secrets. Earlier, I spoke about Victor's friend, Henry Clerval. So they are lifelong friends. Henry shows up at various points in Victor's life, and he is the positivity to Victor's just absolute drudgery. And so in the book, he's a constant ray of sunshine. No matter what, he's just joy. Even when he feels bad for Victor, even when he's nursing him back to health, even when he's very concerned about him, he's like, hey, there's still a lot of life to live. Let's, live and find happiness somewhere. And he's very oblivious to everything that Victor has done. You get the idea that he kind of suspects, but it's never flat out said. Whereas in the movie, he finds out exactly what Victor's up to. And he's like, what the F, dude? serious? And it gets to the point where, Victor is, when he meets the creature and the creature is, telling him his life story and basically like, this is all your fault. You abandoned me. You didn't help me. You didn't stay with me. You left me to myself and now everybody rejects me. I could have used your help. And so now to pay me back, you're going to make a female version of me. And I want a mate, and then we will leave forever and you'll never see us again, but you're going to make me a female version. And Victor's like, the hell I am. But then, of course, he agrees. He's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. So Henry Clerval in the movie gets wind of that. Like, he finds out, he sees everything. He sees the random pieced together corpse of a woman on a table in a lab. It's so creepy. And he's like, what are you doing in here? And in the movie, Henry is the reason why Victor snaps out of it. It's like, okay, I won't do this. But in reality, or in the book, that moment has come across when Victor's like, wait a minute, if I do this, what if for some reason they can have kids, the creature and the female creature, what if they can have kids and they start a whole race of creatures and it brings destruction to the world? I mean, it's like borderline racist, y'all. It's like bonkers the way he describes this. And Victor's like, I can't do it. And he destroys the female version of the creature in front of the creature. Like he burns her or something. He basically destroys her and the creature's like, what are you doing? But in the movie, it's Henry and Victor that together, we can't do this. Okay, let's get rid of the body. And Henry helps him dispose of the body. And then he's like, see, you're done. You're free. You'll live a good life. And tomorrow will be better. Spoiler, tomorrow is not better, but we'll get to that. The last major difference in the two are Victor Frankenstein's father, who in both the movie and the book, Victor's father is super supportive, very happy, very jovial, just wants to give Victor the best life he can. Like I said, they give him another person as a gift. And in the book, even through all of Victor's father's desperation, Victor never confides in him. He never tells him what he's doing. He never lets him know that, this is why he's the way he is. This is why he keeps disappearing. This is why he's tortured, that sort of thing. And Victor's even like, I had the best father in the world and I still couldn't go to him. I still couldn't confide in him. And so Victor's father dies, just always supporting his son and just never knowing why his son was, afflicted the way he was. And in the movie, this is very different. Once Elizabeth is killed in the movie by the creature, Victor's father blames Victor and he's like, you're basically a plague on our house. You've brought nothing but death since you've started your, schooling, and I want you out of here. You have to leave. Don't ever come back. And he gets thrown out of the house and Victor's father abandons him. It's like, leave. Which I guess in the movie is supposed to mirror, Victor got abandoned by his father just like he abandoned his creature. Either way, it makes me sad because in the book it's very moving in that Victor always had this support system, and it lends to so much more of his torture because he's like, I did this to this amazing family that's been nothing but nice to me. And so that's kind of taken away in the movie a little bit. But that's not to say that I feel sorry for Victor, because I don't. He's a terrible person. So the big character differences, I want to start with the creature first. The creature to me is the most fascinating part of all of this. He's not my favorite character. I'll get to that. But he is the most fascinating to me because there's so much that can be interpreted. And I think that no matter what time period you're in, you can always draw parallels to what's happening in the present day, based on where you are, because this character is just I don't know. You can pull so much from it. There are things that I'm reading, when I was reading this book, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like today with this, or with this that happened. And so the creature is one of the most fascinating characters. So in the book, like I said, we get pages and pages and pages of backstory from Victor Frankenstein and the creature. So when we finally get to the creature story, we learn everything from his very first breath, like the moment he opens his eyes and realizes, hey, what is this? What am I seeing? Like he can't process it. It's also overwhelming, which you can imagine when you're a baby, you don't understand. You don't have that level of awareness. But can you imagine just all of a sudden waking up as a fully fledged adult and just being like, hey, what's happening? So we learned everything from his first breath and realization of life to his initial struggles with, being a person, to his constant rejections from everybody, from all corners. Victor Frankenstein is the first to reject him, and then various townspeople, and eventually the DeLacys, the family that he, comes to learn from, and that shapes him emotionally, mentally, and who he comes to love. Like he ends up loving everybody in that house. So with each rejection, he gets more and more vengeful until he's just like a flat out murderer, but in all that, and I'm talking about the book here, and all of that, I still feel sympathy for him. I mean, he should be viewed as super entitled, and towards the latter part of the book, he gives off tremendous like incel vibes, with his demand for a mate. But through all that, I can't help it. I still feel bad for him. He starts out with such wonder and gentility. Like when he's retelling the first few weeks of his life, it's very gentle. That's the only way to describe it. And it's only through the cruelness of those around him regarding his looks that he becomes brutal. It's a very much a question of nurture versus nature. Would he have turned out this way had Frankenstein not immediately abandoned him? And if he had stuck around and guided him through those first few weeks and months of life, I mean, would this have all happened? And in the movie, we still get his backstory, but it's way more muted. And as far as looks go, this dude is not scary. He's like, in the movie, he's like crusty. He's a little musty, but he's nothing like the book describes him. So here's the description of the creature from the book. He's 8 foot tall, hideously ugly creation with translucent yellowish skin pulled so taut over the body that it barely disguised the workings of the arteries and muscles underneath. With watery, glowing eyes, flowing black hair, black lips, and prominent white teeth. Gross, right? Like that, yes, if you saw an 8 foot tall dude with translucent skin, and you could see all of his veins and he had like watery glowing eyes, you'd be like, hey, what's up, dude? In the movie, he literally looks like to me, the first thing I thought was, is this Tom Cruise? Is this like a giant unwashed Tom Cruise? And in real life, it's funny because I'm like, okay, he's not scary looking in the movie. Like I said, he looks kind of like Tom Cruise. And in real life, I guarantee there would be plenty of people out there that would be like, I could work with this. I mean, he's a bit dirty, but it's fine. I guarantee there would be people that would be all over it. And in this version, I just didn't feel the same sympathies with him. Yes, I mean, we see his first moments and the first murder's watered down. So it's, it's an accident and we see people rejecting him. But it's just, he comes off as more petulant, and it's like the entitlement that I should have felt in the book comes through more in the movie. His being abandoned and constantly rejected, it's like he feels entitled now to everything that he seeks. He like deserves the attention of those at the cottage who he secretly helps. And of course, then Frankenstein deserves what's coming to him for what he did to him. I don't know. Again, like I said, they follow the same timeline and they follow the same storyline, but I just didn't feel the same level of sympathy as I did for the book Creature. Maybe because we do get those pages and pages and pages of his innermost thoughts. But yeah, it didn't draw the same feelings for me. Not to say that it wasn't a good portrayal. I want to clarify, I very much enjoyed the movie. My husband actually like watched it with me, and he's read the book, he's seen several adaptations, and he really enjoyed it, and I did too. I just fresh off the book, nonstop thinking about it. There was just that little bit of pull towards the book as opposed to the movie when it comes to the creature. All right, now Frankenstein, I don't care, book or movie, he's the worst. He's the absolute worst. So, book Frankenstein, it's funny because he goes through these phases where he's like, this is all my fault. But in reality, you don't get the feeling that he really thinks anything is his fault. He never really takes any sort of real responsibility in what he's done. Like, he blames himself, at times to various people. He makes his grand statements of, the death of William and Justine. It's all on me. I did this. I brought this on our family. Blah. But it always comes off to, it read to me more like it happened to him as fate instead of, dude, you created a creature and then abandoned him. Like, you did this. You did this to yourself. There was just always this little thread of, he was saying that he did this all and like, this is all his fault, but it almost felt prideful in a way. He let his life get consumed with this experiment. It's finally successful. Then once he realizes what he's done, he leaves the creature and he thinks problem solved and that's it. And then again, it just keeps consuming his life. And the more it consumes him, the more he's like, woe is me. I can't believe this is my life. I can't believe this is what's happened to me. Well, you did it to yourself. And even in death, even when he's at death's door, like even on the ship with Robert Walton, and he's relaying his story, and it's clear that he's not going to make it off this ship. He's not going to find the creature and give him, the death he thinks he so rightly deserves. It's not going to happen. Even at death's door, he's like, I'm miserable. And I guess it's my fault, but in the end, it was fate, just the worst. And that's the thing is the one time I think that he's doing a good deed by telling Robert Walton, hey, let me tell you this tale so that way I can get you to stop following in what I see are my footsteps, until he's about to die. And then he's like, look, I know I just spent 11 years telling you my life story to prevent you from making the same mistakes I did. But when I finally die, would you please take up this mantle and kill the 8-foot murderer I've literally spent my life being tortured by and could never kill? Okay, thanks. Bye. Like, he actually says, hey, would you go ahead and do this for me after I die? Because I didn't get to. That'd be great. What? And I'm not even going to get to again because I already talked about it. His family, he's the worst to his family. He's so selfish. The entire time they are desperately, like, just at every turn, like, tell us what's wrong. Tell us how we can help you. And he abandons them over and over again in their grief, in their worst times. And he never tells them what's wrong. And it's so selfish. It's so cruel. It's so unfair. And he does it in both the book and the movie. And that's why Victor Frankenstein is the worst. And that's why this book almost broke me. I couldn't get over it. I just ranting to everybody that would listen, my poor coworkers and my poor husband. I was like, listen, and then let me tell you what happened. So the last two people I want to talk about before I wrap this up are Robert Walton and Henry Clerval. So Robert Walton, has the framework of the story. It's the letter to his sister. In the book and in the movie, he's captaining the ship that finds this near-death man while out on the water. So in the book, what cracks me up about Robert Walton is he's hearing this fantastical tale, right? Just this tale of very miserable, torturous, just torment drink of this man that he's known for about 48 hours who's telling him this tale. And the whole time, all I can think of is, I finally found a friend. Remember, he's like to his sister, remember I told you I was really lonely? Somebody just showed up and he's kind of weird and he's got this fantastical tale, but he could totally be my friend. And It's like, dude, this guy has done nothing but force his misery on you in the longest story ever told, and you want him to be your BFF. The whole time I was reading this, I was like, get off the boat, dude. Go touch some grass. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, Book Walton is every woman in her 20s who meets an emotionally unavailable man and is like, I can change him. Girl, no, you can't. Move on. Find someone else. He dies anyway, so it doesn't matter, but you get what I'm saying. And in the movie, it's Donald Sutherland. Like I said earlier, I didn't think, I didn't read him to be older in the book. I thought he was just going to be the same age, maybe even younger than Victor Frankenstein. But in the end, it's Donald Sutherland. Like, he's the master at listening on screen. When somebody's talking or it's a big monologue and Donald Sutherland is opposite this person or something big is happening, the subtle facial decisions this man makes just when listening to his co-stars, it's art. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I don't even care that he doesn't match the book. I don't even care that he didn't write letters. It's Donald Sutherland. He's amazing. It works. Okay. So I saved my favorite character for last. I said I had a favorite, and this is him, Henry Clerval. Y'all, justice for Henry. Henry is, he's so sweet. He's so loving. He's just trying to live his joyous Henry life. Like, he is precious in the book and almost as precious in the movie because he's played to perfection by Dan Stevens. Like, seriously, I don't even know how old he is in this movie. Like, I don't know how old Dan Stevens was when he made this, but it was perfectly cast. He has those big, bright blue eyes that are just really wide and very innocent looking. And he's got that little smirk, like just that, that little boyish, hint. And yet he's grown into a teenager. Perfect casting. The only real difference is that, in the movie, like I said, he finds out and he helps them dispose of the body. Weird. Or actually, Victor does most of it, but he knows and he helps him get the body to the water. Anyways. And so when he dies, it's very upsetting in both the book and the movie. More so in the book because the last time that, Henry and Victor are together, Henry is just like, okay, I'm going to go off. There's still life to live. It's just a wonderful day. And he's smiling and he's happy. And then you never see him again. And in the movie, it's similar, except for he's not really about to leave for like a party. He just helped him carry a pieced together female version of the creature to dump in a body of water in the middle of the night. And Henry's like, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. That's done. And he doesn't because we never see him again. Which makes me sad because Henry's very sweet. And I just want justice for Henry Clerval. I'm going to make shirts. Okay, so which was better? Can I say no one? Just kidding. Can I say no one wins? No, I'm just kidding. So I've thought about this a lot. And while I enjoyed the movie, because it removes, like 75% of Victor Frankenstein's emotional vomit. And it was nice to, like I said, see Hallmark of yore. I still think I got to pick the book. Even with my disdain of Victor Frankenstein. Because then no matter how much I dislike his character, you know what I'm saying? He's like the ultimate, actually wife guy. But even with all that, I think about Mary Shelley, holed up with Percy Shelley and Lord Byron and John Polidori. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I get why you wrote them like this. I get why you wrote all the men in this book like this. And I get why this book is the way it is. And good for you, Mary Shelley, because I get it. So that's it. I'm picking the book. We did it. We covered Frankenstein, Hallmark's Frankenstein. I'm so excited that this movie exists, y'all. I really want y'all to go see it. You can find it to stream on Amazon Prime. That's what we did. I think you can find it for free viewing on Plex right now. But we did I think we bought it on Amazon Prime for like $4 or $5. Worth it. It was fun. It was good. So have you read this book? Have you read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or watched this Hallmark adaptation? What did you think? And how much did you hate Victor Frankenstein? You can tell me. Let's be in on this together. Let's rant about him together. But yeah, please let me know your thoughts. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Which Was Better or on the website, whichwasbetter.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening, commenting, sharing, and just, generally being awesome. I very much appreciate each and every one of you. Every time one of you guys sends me a message or a retweet or a like, or even when y'all send me a message and say, hey, I read this book because of your episode, it fills me with joy. So thank you guys. And you know what? Happy Halloween, because this is going to come out the Friday before Halloween. So I hope everybody has a safe and fun Halloween, and we will see you next time. Bye.